Anybody hear me? We are now very close to lunch, and I have to say that we are grateful to the Remote Gambling Association for their support, because their sponsorship has helped us to provide that lunch. So, however, I've locked the doors because we do have a small period of questions. So if there are any questions, and we will keep this brief, but if there are any questions, could you please raise your hand, and we'll get a microphone to you. There's one over there.
Hi. I work for the gambling regulator in Gibraltar. Sorry, is this working?
Yeah.
My question is in relation to GPs and the NHS, in particular Parkinson's disease and certain medication that may lead to compulsive gambling. We have had brought to our attention by customers of license holders that they've got Parkinson's, they've been receiving this medication, and as a consequence, they've gambled money, they've lost money more than they usually would. They then mentioned that the GPs brought to the attention that there was a risk in compulsive gambling, but after the event. I'd just like to know whether you know if GPs do mention beforehand, when they prescribe the medication, that there is a risk of compulsive gambling, because it appears to me from the evidence that we see that there seems to be a deficiency in this area.
It's a really interesting question. The evidence around drugs for Parkinson's disease and gambling is just emerging. I know there've been a few cases in America, I think, where it's actually gone to court. I think this is something that does need further investigation. I can't say off the top of my head what GPs do and don't. What we know from the evidence is that GPs often don't identify gambling at all. They often don't know to pick up on the signs. So I would imagine that raising the issue of risks of gambling is probably not happening as often as we would like, and therefore isn't happening as often as we would like in terms of Parkinson clients. I think the important issue with sort of seeking treatment and support is knowing what the early signs are of problem gambling, looking at what other vulnerability factors the actual client has got. It's kind of very early days about the evidence base, so I'm not sure many GPs would necessarily feel comfortable to say this will cause gambling. It's not really a causal effect. I don't know whether Jane has...
Yeah, it's my understanding that the drugs that you're talking about there actually link not to problem gambling but to compulsive behaviour.
Yeah.
So I think it's probably mentioned as there's a potential for compulsive behaviour, but because, as Adrian and Sharon have mentioned, GPs don't know to ask the question about problem gambling, it's not being picked up, and that's why there's the issue. Not necessarily that it's causing problem gambling directly.
Yeah. Adrian, anything?
Could I just add something that I just happened to know? That the Parkinson's Society does signpost to GamCare. We gave them information, they put it in an information letter, and they came to us for that text.
Thank you. Thanks, Anne. Any other questions? Could you put your hand up, Paul?
Paul Bellringer. Really, I'm directing this at Adrian, and what you said were about these other frontline agencies actually asking the question if somebody has a gambling problem. We all know that is likely to draw a blank response. So in the training that you're thinking of developing, how would you communicate to these frontline agencies to be able to elicit whether they have a gambling problem rather than just giving them the bald, asking them in the bald statement?
Well, I was talking with one of my colleagues on this a few years ago, seems like it, a few weeks ago. And basically what he was saying was the fact that it's as simple as being able, and they've got to make the judgment call as to when and how they actually do it. But a simple question by saying, by the way, have you ever had a problem with, say, a particular form of gambling? Say, if you have had a problem with your gambling, or you've had a problem with casinos or betting and so on. Now, if the person does manage to actually say yes, a follow-up question would be, well, would you like actually to get some support for that? And if that question is also yes, then would you like us to actually be able to refer to an agency? Now, it was actually shown, and in that survey that I talked about, this actually came up, that in fact it does just take simple questions. You don't need to actually screen. A simple question, empathically asked, sensitively asked. And it is strange that the person I talked to had actually done this with his gambling problem. And he said it was like a relief. It was like someone actually asked, which enabled me to actually open up. So I think it is the sensitivity, but I also think it's the confidence that is needed to ask this, which is, what kind of response, if I'm a GP or CAB or whatever, am I actually going to get, what kind of response I'm going to get back, which is mind your own business or shut up. But basically, I think inside, the person seeking help just actually needs to have that simple question asked in an empathic way. It's like, God, at last someone has actually asked me. So I'm optimistic. Okay? Does that answer your question? You're smiling.
I know how tough it is, and that's why I ask. Because some studies have obviously said the direct question will get that blank. We know it's a hidden addiction. That's why we're very interested in that. But it is the empathy and the confidence you're talking about as well. But it is a big challenge, but it's a very necessary challenge that you face on this.
Yeah, thank you.
James, did you?
I was just going to add that some research last year. I think it was Southern Cross University in Australia that they tested a one-item gambling screen. Have you had problems with your gambling? And it identified over 92% of problem gamblers compared to actually doing the full 10-item screen. So I don't know if the assertion that it would always be met with a blank response is really true.
Over there, Mike.
Well, I'm sure the people will be able to hear me, but I have a microphone. Somebody from the rank group, rank interactive. I was very interested in what you were all talking about. Don't forget that we're clients as well. So that's research that we made that point. But here we have a regulator from Gibraltar, making that quantum leap from drugs that are given to people with whatever disease it was, and my apologies, Parkinson, thank you. But it was all to do with gambling, when actually it's all to do with compulsive behaviour. But that information and that sort of discussion stream never gets to the practitioners like me who have to make decisions on letters, on phone calls, on people who have been excluded who want to come back in. I don't get any support. I have to make those decisions. And nearly, a good quarter of the audience here are in the same boat as myself. And I think one of the things that you're possibly missing is acting as a knowledge box that you talked about, Stella, because that then squares the circle, as it were. And I think that's quite important for me.
Thank you. Can I just pick up on that? I think it's a really good point. And one of the things that we're very conscious of and have been trying to do over the last probably year and a half or so is actually try to use different mechanisms to spread back authoritative information. And one of the problems you always have with problem gambling is that everybody brings to it their particular perceptions and their particular prejudices. And it is very difficult getting facts reported, and it is very difficult actually feeding back what the real situation is. We're trying to do more about that. And one of the things that the Knowledge Transfer Project is about is to try and create effectively a virtual forum for operators, people who are leading on social responsibility, through a sort of moderated forum through us, to try and leave the commercial aspects aside and to look at, well, what are the facts, what's the reality, what can we feed back to you, let's get a more informed discussion about what works, what doesn't, and so on. And I think partly what you're saying, is that actually we should think about that. Inevitably we think about forum, and this is in the context of working online, but hey, this is about land-based as well. We need to be able to make sure that we can act as that go-between and collector and disseminator of information. But we need to disseminate it in a way that is easily assimilable, that people can take on board. It's simple, it's straightforward, it keeps people up to date. So we'll reflect on that, I think. That's very important. Any other questions?
I'd just like to add to that there has been an enormous step change in the industry, both land-based and remote, in the last, certainly since the advent of the 2005 Gambling Act in the UK, and certainly in other jurisdictions where we see the changes that are taking part or are about to take part, perhaps in Europe. And we play a very important part in that, because we, of course, are informed by those problem gamblers who present themselves to us at GamCare every day. And it's through the work that we do with the industry that we can build up those relationships and work with you to implement these player protection tools and to help you to manage the challenges that you have when working with your customers and working with those who are displaying signs that they may be affected by problem gambling. And this is again where, just to underline what Andy was saying about, working with staff is really important to us. We learn from you and you learn from us, and it's that's a win-win situation. And if we can help the problem gambler, then that's what we're all about. So please, we'll continue to support you, and we thank you for supporting us.
I could also add something to that. I think it's important to highlight the fact that the national hotline is open to everybody, not just the gambler. We welcome questions and inquiries, and we will support the gambling industry every way that we can. If you work with the industry and you have concerns because you're working with a particular customer, you're worried about a customer, or you've heard about research, call up the helpline, ask those questions to our advisors. If they can't help you, then they'll know someone who can. So I'm hoping that might be that message isn't getting across effectively, and that's really good feedback for us.
Okay, thank you very much indeed to everybody for coming today. I hope what we hoped to do today was to get across to you, if you like, the breadth of activity that GamCare is involved in and the areas that we're hoping to develop. I hope it's also illustrated for you the breadth of talent that's within GamCare, and I would like to finish really by saying how pleased I am to lead a team that's got such knowledge and commitment, and that goes right through all of the staff that work in GamCare. We can now unlock the doors and let you go for lunch. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you've enjoyed the morning. Thank you.